Metamorphic vision leads us to some kind of zomorphic atmosphere, merging bodies and spaces with animals by reshaping them and mutating their behavior, forming strange entities.
Who told them? Where did they get it from? How is it possible? They say, because we look at them and say, well, we're the civilized people, we have drugs.
How do they?
They're
The evidence is high.
bush people.
How do these guys discover
Now
that?
suddenly
Because
we're going to
it
do
is
the
advanced.
same thing.
There's engineering design features inside these
Now listen to the science
explained by
involved.
acoustics. Now let me explain that. The acoustics is
And this is not an accident. I can tell you more about that, why that is not an accident. It's, designed to do that. But anyway, and this is not an accident. I can tell you more about that, why that is not an accident. It's, designed to do that. But anyway,
of course, these ancient cultures believed in a conscious world. They had a kind of animistic perspective on reality, but that's not normal in today's world. Of course, these ancient cultures believed in a conscious world. They had a kind of animistic perspective on reality, but that's not normal in today's world.
The Tabor Trig Ancestral Engraving Ground, a small engraving ground west of Tabor Trig in the Cottage Point area of northern Sydney, New South Wales, is a small engraving ground next to a pothole in the rock platform. These engravings are what has been described as six mundus, meaning footprints, that have fought to point to a nearby site which has two deities. The Tabor Trig Ancestral Engraving Grounds is only one part of a bigger sacred space. This sacred space operates as a whole system that acts like an acoustic machine as well as astronomically. It was a natural device that generates sound and vibrations. The energy generated within the Tabor Trig Ancestral Engraving site would help to induce altered states of consciousness. The images that you see, or mundus, are examples of pure entoptic imagery. At this part of the visionary sacred space was to help the ancestors progress further into trance. It's the beginning of that journey, which is the entoptics phenomena that then become cultural familiar content, and then progresses to the iconic full-blown visionary stage, which contact is created with ancestral beings of the ancestors, which is how this sacred space at the Tabor Trig Ancestral Engraving Grounds is laid out. They were finding these natural energetic sacred spaces within the Cottage Point Tabor Trig area and amplifying the spaces. This is important to understand the mechanics within the Tabor Trig Engraving Grounds layout.
If only we knew. If only we knew, but just trying to understand what the hell were they doing. The effort that goes into making something like that, just tremendous. I can't even imagine. Yeah, today when we build a house or build a building, we do it quickly, we do it cheaply, and we do it for a specific purpose, whether it's a swimming pool or a tennis court or a house or a shop or whatever. But, the effort justifies the use. But when you go to a sacred site, the tremendous effort that went into that, how's it justified by the use? What were they doing there? Why did they build it? What's your take on this? If only we knew. If only we knew, but just trying to understand what the hell were they doing. The effort.
And yet this is extremely important as to the nature of ourselves. Last week we looked at a subject that one can only consider as bizarre, yet natural and reasonable. And namely, are people who claim to have a spiritual or sometimes visionary experience
As the ancestors journey deeper within the depths of consciousness, the entoptics are the gateway and they start to replicate, rotate and superimpose with one another.
As journey deeper within the depths of consciousness and they start to replicate, rotate and superimpose with one another. As the ancestors journey deeper within the depths of consciousness, the entoptics are the gateway and they start to replicate. As the ancestors journey deeper within the depths of consciousness, the entoptics are the gateway and they start to replicate, rotate and superimpose with one another.
This is similar to the process and like a natural piezoelectric system to help generate and intensify the energy within this sacred space to further assist in the spiritual practices of journeying into the spiritual realm via altered states of consciousness. The engravings are an engineering manipulation of the natural landscape structure to enhance the vibrations of the Tabor Trig Ancestral Engraving Grounds and space within this area. Remembering the engravings were engraved on sandstone, and sandstone has a higher quartz content. Once we know that, it can make some sense with the exposed quartz in the engraving space. When you have the quartz exposed and you make compressions on the quartz, it's creating voltage, and also in the other way. If you send a voltage to the quartz will change its shape. So it will be compressed and generate a piezoelectrical effect. So yes, piezoelectricity transfers vibration into electrical energy. When a piezoelectrical material experiences mechanical stress like vibration, it generates an electrical charge, converting the vibration into energy. One way they vibrated the Tabor Trig Ancestral Engraving Ground was through sound, because sound waves, which are vibrations, will provide the mechanical stress needed to generate the effect. A powerful modality is harnessing the vibrational frequencies of sound to induce altered states of consciousness. A symphony of vibrations fills the ancestral Tabor Trig Ancestral Engraving Ground space, resonating with the cells of the ancestor's body. Their brainwaves begin to synchronize with the frequency of the sound, leading to shifts in consciousness management, then while in this state or helping to get into this state or trying to progress further to higher states. So the practice and part of the design's purpose was aimed to alter the natural sounds generated from the ancestors and the mediums they created, and natural mediums placed on themselves and throughout the surrounding area. They were focusing on capturing and channeling the energy rather than significantly losing it to the atmosphere. Sound waves in matter at the Tabor Trig Ancestral Engraving Grounds. Yes, sound does travel through rocks. In fact, sound travels very well through solid materials like rocks because the tightly packed particles can efficiently transmit vibrational energy, making the speed of sound in rock much faster than in air. Sound waves in the Tabor Trig Engraving Ground were both longitudinal, where the particles vibrated in the same direction as the wave, and also transverse, where the particles vibrated perpendicular to the wave direction. Density impact. The denser part of the Tabor Trig engraving ground generally transmitted sound faster due to the closer particle arrangement. Sound travelled in the rock in the form of both longitudinal and transverse waves, but in the air the sound travelled only in the form of longitudinal waves.
By spiritual traditions all over the world, a lot of energetic research into different types of work done in the ancient world and how it can be applied today with how you work with these energies. So spiritual power spots are particular locations that have the BG3 energy, this balancing energy naturally, and these locations are cultivated by spiritual traditions all over the world. A lot of
what it is. Now, maybe it's not that complicated.
Right on, absolutely.
Like, talks like, walk, smells like, whatever all that thing is. Like, if it looks like what it is, then maybe it just is what it is. Now, maybe it's not that complicated.
Right on, absolutely.
Like, talks like, walk, smells like, whatever all that thing is. Like, if it looks like what it is, then maybe it just is what it is. Now, maybe it's not that complicated.
This is a chart of entoptic phenomena, the shapes and symbols and imagery that you see when you go through altered states of consciousness. Understanding some of the basics will understand the Tabor Trig engraving ground and designed visions. This is about brainwave entrainment and consciousness management and how sound shaped the ancestors' consciousness. They experienced derealization, a sense of detachment from their environment, unity of experiences, a sense of unity or oneness, the perception of non-physical lights, ecstatic thrills, vivid perceptions, changes in perceived size, sensations of bodily heat or electricity. All this is about the frequency, nature, and perceived impact of these experiences on their well-being. This site was used at specific exact times of the year. This site and area was not used at certain times of the year because there was food availability or resources. It was all due to heat energy. Why? Because at certain times of the year, and if you have enough people present, they were able to generate the right amount of energy required to have the desired effect they were looking for. Why warmer parts of the year? Because sound energy, vibrational energy, kinetic energy. Because when the temperature of an object increases, the average kinetic energy of its particles increases. When the average kinetic energy of its particles increases, the object's thermal energy increases. The telluric current energy, and most importantly solar energy, all transfer 10 times better through mediums and is easier to generate and manage the abundance. The transfer of heat was key for the ancestors to maximizing energy usage, and the human body is a medium, and the ancestors were well aware of that. Is consciousness and knowledge the same? Consciousness is prior to knowing. Then giving rise to a conscious experience via the consciousness code. Sound, frequency, and synchronicity.
Not even just that, like, who gives you the right to ask these questions or say these things like you don't know anything, but the truth is,